Welcome back to the NATO Public Forum YouTube studio. I'm Jack Kelly from TLDR News, and I'm joined by James Cleverly, the UK's Foreign Minister. Thanks for joining us.
That's right. Good to be here.
I'd like to start with the big topic that everyone's discussing here and around the world, the conflict in Ukraine. You've stated recently that Ukraine's rightful place is within NATO. Do you think that the UK and NATO more generally are doing enough to defend Ukraine? And are you at all worried about the risks of escalation as the UK steps up material support?
Well, we have, from the UK's point of view, we've been very proud of the fact that we've always been comfortable moving early in our support for Ukraine. We provided the NLAW missiles, remember everyone talked about so much, prior to Russia's full-scale invasion and the training to go with it. I'm very, very proud of the fact that we were the first country that committed to donating main battle tanks to Ukraine in their self-defense. Other countries have also really put themselves forward, made some really significant commitments. The United States have given a huge amount, but so have other countries. And we will continue talking with the Ukrainians about what they need next to successfully defend their country against Russian aggression. And people talk about escalation, but we must never lose sight of who the aggressor is in this instance. It was Russian tanks that crossed the border into Ukraine. It's Russian missiles that are hitting civilian infrastructure and civilian targets in Ukraine. So Russia is the country that escalated this. What we are doing, what other allies are doing, is supporting Ukraine as best we can so that Ukraine itself and the Ukrainian people can defend their country against that brutal, unprovoked invasion.
And when it comes to NATO, we obviously got some fairly major news yesterday that Turkey had finally agreed to Sweden's accession, paving the way for them to become the 32nd member of NATO. Why is it that you think Turkey and Erdogan changed their mind on this issue? And more generally, what do you think Sweden are going to be able to contribute towards NATO?
Sweden and Finland both applied to join simultaneously. Finland was accepted in about 6 months ago, if I remember rightly. Turkey had some concerns over Sweden's position with regards to terrorism and counter-terrorism, particularly Kurdish terrorism. They made those concerns clear to Sweden, and Sweden set about making some fairly significant and very quick changes to their own legal position to address those concerns. I think what we've seen is Sweden move very, very fast, and clearly in the conversations they had most recently with President Erdogan, they had reassured him that they had done everything that they could to address those concerns. I'm very, very pleased that President Erdogan made the announcement that he is going to move forward on the process that will see Sweden fully joining NATO. I've had a commitment from Hungary that they will look to do so quickly as well. So pretty soon we should see Sweden as the 32nd ally in this defensive alliance. And that's good because Sweden is a very, very capable military nation. They have got very good military equipment production. We've worked with them as part of the Joint Expeditionary Force, so we know that they are a very, very capable ally, and they will make Sweden safer, but they will also make the rest of the alliance safer by joining. So I very much welcome the flag-raising ceremony where they get to become a full member.
Absolutely. And focusing on the UK for a moment, since your time first entering Parliament back in 2015, there's been a pretty major shift in Britain's foreign policy. Just to outline it for our audience, many of whom are younger and maybe don't remember all of the stuff that's happened since then. When you became an MP under David Cameron, the government looked like it was hailing a golden era of Sino-British relations. It looked like the UK was deepening military cooperation with France, and the UK seemed to be stepping up its presence in the Middle East. For instance, in 2014, the UK reopened a permanent naval base in Bahrain. Today, though, a lot of these things have changed. It looks like the UK is following the US out of the Middle East and into the Asia-Pacific region via the AUKUS Security Pact, and you've personally described China as the largest threat to Britain and world security and the prosperity this century. Why do you think it is that in the last few years we've seen this dramatic shift, both in the UK's approach and more globally?
Well, the UK's foreign policy has got to respond to global events. And a lot of what we are doing and we plan to do in the future is in response to things that have happened or that we have credible predictions are going to happen. I'm going to pull you up on one thing. We haven't moved out of our relationship with the Middle East. Quite the contrary. We are in discussions with the GCC, which is the grouping of the Gulf nations, about enhanced trade relations. I'm sure they'll forgive me for saying this. I had lunch with the ambassadors of the Gulf region only last week, and we were talking about enhanced cooperation on health and biomedical science, on education, as well as on trade. So our enhanced focus on the Indo-Pacific is a reflection of the fact that that part of the world is growing quickly, both economically and in influence. We have long-standing pre-existing relationships there. You talk about AUKUS. Obviously, our relationship with Australia, just like a number of other Commonwealth countries in the region, is incredibly strong, and we're looking to build on that. But our change, our evolution in posture towards China is in response to China's actions and activities. And what I set out in the speech that I gave on this a few months ago is that, of course, we're going to continue engaging with China, but we're also going to defend ourselves against any Chinese activity in the UK that we feel is inappropriate. And we're going to build alliances with countries both in the region and more broadly. So, look, we evolve. The world changes, and we've got to make sure that our foreign policy changes with it.
Finally, I know you don't have a crystal ball and you also don't have long left in this interview, but considering how far foreign policy has changed in the UK in the last 5 to 10 years, where do you suspect our focus will be in the next 5 and 10 years?
Oh, look, 5 to 10 years, that's not even crystal ball territory. No, genuinely, when I talk to my officials about predicting geostrategic or global trends, I've said, and I've spoken about this publicly, we need to be thinking about the relationships that we're looking to build over the next 20, 30, 40, maybe even 50 years' time. So 5 to 10 years, that's like near horizon. Things that we know that AI is going to have a huge impact on global markets. We know that technology and also the physical products that underpin technology, microchips, critical minerals, they are going to be absolutely key. As I've already said, we can see that the Indo-Pacific region is growing economically and in terms of influence. India has now overtaken China in terms of population, and their economic growth is continuing. Indonesia, a very, very significant global player, growing in influence on the world stage. So 5 to 10 years is not crystal ball territory. We've set out our thinking about that in the integrated review refresh. It's not available at all good bookshops, but it is downloadable from the government's website. Have a read of it, and that sets out our thinking for the next until 2030.
Amazing. Well, you've given me some homework to do after this. Thank you so much for your time, Minister.
Cheers, lovely.
If you want more updates on this story and others, then be sure to check out our show, The Daily Briefing. Now, we obviously discuss a whole load of news across the TLDR network, but The Daily Briefing is your quick update, getting you up to speed on the world's biggest political issues in just a matter of minutes. Now, a bunch of other news organizations obviously do these kinds of daily summaries, but coming from TLDR, you know that it has our normal, unbiased, explanatory, and only semi-serious tone. So if you want to feel fully tuned in, check out The Daily Briefing. You can watch on YouTube or Nebula just by searching for the TLDR Daily Briefing, or you can listen by searching for us in your favorite podcast app. Thanks for your support.